Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am their host every Monday, Ethan Orfe, and we have quite a few things to talk about, to converse on, to speak on, and, you know, it's going to be a fun time. So, we got some transfer stuff, some stuff about LSU, and they're hiring some coaches. National Signing Day happened last week, or this week rather. The Baylor stuff is getting really coming to a close soon, and the XFL. Even in college football, we may have to talk about the XFL because, as I'm speaking, I watched the first two games and I enjoyed them, and it seems like people are enjoying them, and you don't really know how it will affect most things, but if they end up being a successful commodity and they expand, you never know what could happen, but that's going to be coming up later. But first, have to talk about Mark Dantonio, former Michigan State head coach Mark Dantonio. He decided to step down this week, and this is after, in November, he said he was going to return to the team, but he has decided to step down after only a day of allegations really coming out, and this is the violations that the NCAA has made public are arranging jobs for players' parents and illegal off-campus recruiting visits by their recruiter. And of course, Dantonio denies all of these, but this is a pretty common thing that happens to head coaches in the NCAA, either in college basketball or football mostly, that I see, where, people try to get an edge on recruiting any way possible all the time. And, you would say most people who think they know about college football, I'm not saying I know about everything about college football either, but a lot of guys end up saying, well, this is just something that everybody does, and he got caught for it. And that, what can you really say about a statement like that? It can be as damning or as evidence filled as it possibly can, but at the end of the day, it's a part of the rules, and then you can't really say, oh, this guy also does it down the road, so why do I have to take the fall when I know this person does it? Well, that's not how the NCAA works. It never worked in elementary school. Just like back in the 5th grade, if you knew somebody cheated on the math test, but you got caught, and you want to bring somebody down with you, they were never caught cheating. So how can you prove that? And that's kind of what we're at right now with the NCAA. You can't prove everybody's cheating, but it's well known that, it's believed that people are going to do whatever they can to get a competitive edge over the next guy. And when you are in the Big Ten, competition is everything. You're going up against Michigan and Ohio State. What are you supposed to do as far as try and compete. So Mark Dantonio, 13 seasons, 114 wins to 57 losses and 3 Big Ten titles. You know, that's a pretty decent resume, aside from not really going to the national title. Their defensive coordinator will be the interim head coach. He's actually the nephew of a former Ohio State head coach, Jim Tressel. So that's interesting family connection ties. But really it's just interesting how this whole thing kind of went down. Dantonio decided to step down the day before National Signing Day. So I don't know how that has affected, their signing day, their recruiting, but it can't possibly have done any favors for them. Commitments and all that. You never really know how that looks. But, the guy is 63. I don't know exactly what's going to happen to the program. They may lose, recruiting. They may lose some, potential scholarship spots, but it's not looking good. And to be honest, you don't really have anything to show for it. And I think that's where I'm getting to the point. When somebody gets found for cheating, so using banned recruiting tactics or using immoral recruiting tactics to bring in players, and it doesn't result into winning the big game or winning anything really. Was it worth it? Do you feel like it makes it worth it now, or what was the value of doing this in the first place, right? So this is like you getting into anything bad or anything, doing something expecting to get an edge over something and still not winning. This is like, taking the lottery numbers, knowing that, or let me say this. This is like if you knew some guy that could rig the lottery in your favor, but it doesn't really secure a win. Like you'll never 100% win the lottery, but they do know some things that can help boost your odds substantially than the competition. So you pay them off to give you some information, and you do it maybe for a few months, and it doesn't work out for you. And of course, you're out of pocket X amount of money, out of time and effort, and then you get caught for it. And I'm not sure what the cheating, what would happen if you got caught cheating on the lottery, but, is it worth it? Like, say if you go to jail, was it worth it? When the odds probably were way too substantial in the first place. So why cheat in the first place? It's not going to make any difference. So with, recruiting scandals like this, I'm like, why is it worth it when you weren't going to really compete against Ohio State or maybe even Michigan this year? That's just not something that Michigan State has been able to do in the last few years, especially not Ohio State. Ohio State is the juggernaut of the conference. And if you weren't going to beat them, why cheat or why recruit in ways that are not good and not, not regulated? So I would argue, well, I guess they argue is that everybody does it. And the only thing is that they were the ones that got caught. So maybe that's just the end all be all. Maybe every college should be investigated on for recruiting tactics. So I'm sure that, at some level, guys have to do it more because the prestige. Alabama, maybe at a time, had some recruiting scandals or could have recruiting scandals, but they're so prestigious now it doesn't really make sense to believe that people don't want to go to Alabama. You know, they don't want to go to one of the best schools and best programs in the last decade. If you look at Clemson, what do they need a recruiting scandal for? Maybe it's just to get the edge over Alabama or Georgia or any other big Power 5 school, you know. That would be the only reason why I'd think about that. But at the end of the day, you're going to get recruits. You're going to get talented guys. And if you believe in your program, you know, enough and what you have able to do, maybe you just don't need to go the extra mile. But can't prove that because at the end of the day, they put their hand in the cookie jar. Can't start pointing fingers for everybody else who decided to wash their hands away from their crumbs. Anyway, we're going to take a break. That was an interesting analogy. That was on the spot. We're going to take a break, and then coming out, we're going to get into some transfer news. Really only one big transfer from what I've seen in the past week, but some transfer news nonetheless. That's coming up.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so the Auburn, I always say Auburn. Auburn leading rusher enters the transfer portal. So, Jatarvius Booby Whitlow. All right, so first things first. That is I don't think I'm over exaggerating when I say that's one of the greatest names I've ever heard in my life. I hope he makes it far in life because I'm a big believer in names taking you farther than most people think. I have a theory about famous people and athletes and names. I've had this for years. It's very hard for you to make it, or it doesn't seem like it's easy to make it with a common name like a Joe Smith or a Jonathan Jacobs, or I guess there is a Jonathan Jacobs out there, but you know, it's harder to make a big name for yourself because the first thing I guess the people see is your name. And if you have an interesting name and you're skillful, people are going to be like, who's this guy? What do they have to offer me? So when you're looking at a resume or you're looking at a huddle or you're looking at whatever recruiting website or, you know, athlete highlight tape stuff and you see a name like Jatarvius Booby Whitlow, you got to click on it, man. Like I would click on it first. I would have been like, wow, who is this guy? Why do I feel like I need him on my roster? It's kind of like the Zion thing. You know, anybody named Zion got to be an interesting guy, you know? But that's besides the point. So let's look. Mr. Whitlow, I'm going to call him Booby Whitlow, led in rushing for Auburn Tigers from 2018 and 2019. And he was coming off a season of 156 carries for 763 yards and 10 TDs. The thing about this season, or the previous season, was that he went down because of an injury during the Florida game where he had 18 carries for 81 yards. So he was already cooking. Boobie was doing his thing. He was getting some yardage. He was getting some touches. And all of a sudden, some unfortunate actions happened to occur in the game. And he was hurt for the majority of the rest of the year. And now he's deciding to transfer to another school. Why? I'm really not sure. He was a rising junior. So I'm really not sure why this is the time for him to transfer. But they were, Auburn is already looking to roll with DJ Williams, who had 84 carries for 400 yards in 9 games. So, he was sharing some of the sugar. And they have a few backs of their own already that, some guys that can help fill the void. And then they also have a 5-star running back recruit coming in. They call him the Tank. Cartavius the Tank Bigsby, another name. Let me tell you, names are important, people. When you start naming your kids or whatever, think about an interesting name to set them apart from everybody else. You want people to be like, who is that? My last name, I used to think, people always mispronounce it. It's so annoying. I never thought about changing it, but I always just felt that, if people never say your name right, what's the point? And I guess I still feel like that to some degree. I like everybody's names to be said properly. And, I've been victim of wrong name saying, offenses, especially in college classrooms, school classrooms, attendance stuff, all that. I've been around the block. I've been around this earth a few times for my name to be mispronounced. But, at the end of the day, it might be worth it. You never know. And sometimes you need all the edge in your life or all the good things to push you over the edge. And having a real memorable name or a interesting name or a favorable name will put you over the edge. So, Cartavius the Tank Bigsby sounds like a wrestler or like a UFC fighter. Cause speaking of UFC, I watched, the UFC John Jones fight versus this opponent. And wow, talk about a guy in John Jones who has a very, very common name, but he is regarded as probably the best of all time. So maybe there's nothing to this theory that I have, but I'm still sticking to it. I think that there's more guys like the Tank out there who are going to be really interesting rather than, somebody named John Jones, or at least more interesting to look into. Let me think. Who else? Clinton Dix, Alabama prospect or Alabama guy who went to the draft, got drafted by the Packers. Liked him a lot because, his name is really, really interesting. At the end of the day, I just like interesting name guys. But, I guess going back to the transfer portal news, I don't really know where he could end up. I don't think most guys who are running backs, I don't know if running backs have a big market in the transfer portal, just because it's a position that kind of fills itself year after year after year. And I've been saying this for a little bit now, that running backs have been devaluing themselves in the market, because if you are somebody who can't catch out of the backfield or block very well, your value is much lower than somebody who can. And now everybody knows that you have to be able to do it all at the running back position. So what do? They practice doing it all. They get the skills up. They learn. They watch film. They watch guys who are known to be masters at what they do in order to improve their own skill. And then the market kind of floods, and everybody can do that. So unless you're like a true, like just outstanding talent at the running back to where like you have all the skills necessary and you're like another level. So like, you know, Ezekiel Elliott coming out of school or Reggie Bush or anybody like that where you're just so talented to where like you're a first round talent. Like, you know, people don't like taking running backs in the first round, but when you're that good, people take running backs in the first round. So like, you know, Saquon was something like that where he had all the tools, all the size, his calves are the size of a woolly mammoth. He is, you know, humongous and nimble and fast and elusive. Those guys, typically don't see a lot of problems getting in the league or getting paid in the league because their talent takes them over the edge. They have no choice but to pay them. But, you know, the guys who are a tier below or 2 tiers below, they're having a tougher time really making a name for themselves or trying to get into high positions on the draft board just because the talent level is already so high at the running back position that, you know, it's kind of like that whole Incredibles line, you know, as another, I'm going to use this as the closing for this segment. If, everybody's super, then nobody is. So, yeah, that's how I feel about running backs right now. If everybody's a super good running back, then nobody is. So, we're going to go ahead and take another break after that. And we're going to get into some Baylor topics because it looks like that investigation is coming to a conclusion. And that's coming up.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, so Baylor has been transparent with all the coaches they brought into for the hiring process for their notice of allegations from the NCAA. As you know, Dave Arnada just took a 5-year deal to be the head coach of Baylor, and you know, we don't know what the allegations are. The school and the NCAA have decided not to comment on the nature of the allegations. We are aware of the sexual assault allegation made back a few years ago when Briles was the head coach, and he was fired from Baylor because of that. And I guess the bottom line is people who were involved in whatever sanctions come down on this notice of allegations are probably already long gone from the Baylor system. I have a hard time believing that some of them are still there besides maybe the athletic director. I'm not too sure, but they're years removed from the school. And, you know, this has been dragged on for quite some time, and this is against the trend that the NCAA has really put out there in recent time, because the NCAA likes to get things over and done with really quickly so they can move on and, you know, punish the right people. And look, I can't tell you what the right way to handle this is. I don't know what the right way to handle this is. I don't think the NCAA knows how the right way to handle this stuff is. They haven't been able to handle these type of cases well in the past, and they still look to struggle when it comes to Title IX allegations, sexual assault. All that kind of stuff usually is not in their wheelhouse, because when it comes to morality, nobody knows what the proper punishment is. Do we punish the athletes who, through transfer rules, they can't transfer anywhere, they have to sit out, they can't go anywhere? How do you punish, a program for something that in reality, unless they knew that these guys did that, how much does the university have to deal with that? Now, of course, the university hides information. They're trying to protect their, investments, assets, however they see their own players. How does the NCAA judge that? Because they are the hammer bringers. They bring the hammer down on everything else. So eventually they're going to have to figure this whole thing out. And it's just a big case of how do you see how does morals play into, punishment? And, at the end of the day, some people are going to say it's fair, however they're punished when it finally does come out. And some people are going to be, feeling like this wasn't enough. Some people are going to think that, it was too much. It wasn't a big of a deal, or whatever the case may be. Everybody has their own opinions on these sort of things. And I'm not saying any one of those is more right than the other. What I am saying is, they have to figure out a way to handle these allegations and handle these investigations and hand them out to the right people in a more timely manner. Because at this point, it even feels like Baylor's trying to move on from this, and they're ready to start a new chapter and start anew. They're interviewing these guys who they want to bring in, but these sanctions and these allegations that only these coaches, only know now, because they had to tell them to know what they were coming into, so that way they knew that what the job was going to entail, how many, scholarships they're going to lose, whatever they're going to lose, if the actual school was going to, not be able to compete, it's going to be bad. So at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like, they want to keep people out of the loop for jobs. So I don't think that scares them. I also think they're very much aware that whatever possibly is going to happen, they knew for a while. It just hasn't been done yet. The sanctions haven't been handed down. I'm sure it's coming soon. So maybe this is why a 5-year deal is more interesting for Dan Arnada than you would think, because he's the first guy in Power 5 to not be a previous head coach and get a 5-year deal. So maybe they're aware that something's going to happen for a good amount of time to the Baylor football program. And they want to be able to compete when the sanctions are done or when their punishment is finished. And they believe in that he is the guy for them, but it's going to take a while. And, that's an interesting angle to look at, because I was reading some articles today, and they were talking about how it's really not really something you ever see where somebody who was not a previous head coach comes into a head coach. I mean, that's not unnormal. That happens, but the time frame, like 5 years, that's like somebody who's already well established and known gets something like that, not a college, defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator who hasn't proven it on the head coach level. And I know Arnauta is coming off a national title, and a lot of people were really interested in him in the first place. So maybe it's not that crazy. Maybe we're just overlooking or looking too deep into this whole thing. And maybe the sanctions are not even that insane. And maybe they just knew that they wanted to hire him and wanted to keep him for a long time. But if the tracks are what they're showing to be, track records of this sort of stuff, NCAA probably doesn't know how to handle this. Baylor is ready for this to be handled. So they're prepping themselves to be in a better position. And they don't want to be, shot in the foot, or they want to shoot themselves in the foot, and they don't want to be in a position where they're going to lose even more later on down the line. Because when the Sandusky stuff happened, Penn State was, really, 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 the following for Penn State is huge. People really ride or die for Penn State. And when the Sandusky stuff happened, people were devastated. The school was tarnished. You couldn't talk about Penn State without bringing up the Sandusky stuff. And now, recent times, Penn State has looked a lot better. They've been, their program has rejuvenated itself. Players that come out of there, people love them. It's a different era time now for them. They turned a new leaf, rather. So it's not impossible to do it again, or for another program to do it again. But in order to do it again, you got to face the music, or the music has to be delivered to them to be faced. So it's only a matter of time. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's definitely been taking a little bit too long than it needs to. And I think it's time for everybody to kind of understand what's going on. And I think the truth needs to come out about this, or the investigation needs to be put to rest, and people need to know what's coming. So that's really all I have to say on that. So let's take another break. And coming out of the break, let's talk about some LSU Ed Orgeron news. As you know, their coaching hiring process is still kind of going on. They're almost done. They're hiring just about everybody they think they need. And they just made some announcements, as Orgeron just had his first presser since they won the national title. So it'd be interesting to see what he had to say. So that's coming up.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So Ed Orgeron, he says LSU will switch to a 4-3 defense under Pelini. So, as you know, they hired their new defensive coordinator, previous LSU national title winner in 2007 under Les Miles. Pelini is a guy who a lot of people are interested, or a lot of people have known of his very aggressive defensive style, and he does a 4-3. So when Orgeron knew that Arnauta was on the way out, of course, he had to find some. He's been thinking about the 4-3 for a while, and that's been reported that he's been having those sort of aspirations for his defense for quite some time. So here we are, a 4-3 defense. from Pelini. Orgeron spoke to the podium for the first time since winning the national title, and he said that he spoke to Pete Carroll because Pete Carroll worked with both Orgeron and Pelini during his tenure as a coach in football, and he said that Pelini has been probably the smartest defensive mind he's ever been around. So it's pretty high praise from a guy who has done it all in all the coaching ranks, so you just kind of have to take his word for it, I suppose. But Orgeron says that Pelini has a great locker room presence. He said that the guys really responded to him. He was fired up the whole time early on. He really was able to get people behind what he was saying and to buy into what's going to happen for the program. This is after, one meeting, I suppose. But he describes the 4-3 as an attack defense. And LSU, they're trying to retool themselves that they're losing like nine people to the NFL draft. They already have 2 really good defensive tackles or defensive linemen, and they bring in 6 more. 2 of them are 4-star defensive linemen. And it's going to be, they're going to take their time and really try and develop these guys, but you'd have to assume that this is the route that they always knew they were going to go into. Because LSU delivers NFL talent every year. So this is no surprise. I mean, they might have not won the national title this year, and they still probably would have had 9 people go into the draft, I suppose. So this was not something unexpected, or they're not prepared for this. So at the end of the day, they knew that they were going to want some guys who can really play for them and be big time playmakers for them. So it's going to be really, really imperative for them to retool. So here we are. They ended up bringing in Pelini to do what he does. And the recruiting we're going to talk about recruiting soon, but they picked up 2 4-star defensive tackles, Jacqueline Rowe and Jacobian Guillory. And you already know those names put a smile on my face because they're interesting. So I'm interested to see what they will be able to do next season if they play. As you know, they are freshmen. But, and they also have 2 people returning in the middle, Tyler Shelvin and Sakai Apu Ika returning as well from their championship run. So those guys with a aggressive style on defense is going to be insane. That's really what attracted hiring Pelini in the first place. So now what does LSU have left to do? LSU, or Orgeron, has said that the hiring process has gone well and they are almost done filling in all their spots. And as there are many vacant offensive and defensive analysis jobs, they've somehow hired all those people or those positions and filled them up. And the only coaching hire he has left to do is finding a passing game coordinator. And they are having interviews with guys already. They're looking primarily for NFL talent or NFL guys, but they're not opposed to hiring guys in the collegiate atmosphere. Orgeron has said many times during on the podium that he wants guys to be able to improve their already prolific offense, and they want people to bring different ideas and different perspectives to their offense. They want innovators. They want guys who can really, really draw up some plays and really make things happen for them, so that way they don't go back to what they used to be. He was quoted saying, "We want different ideas, and we want to marry those ideas with an already prolific offense. He said, the guys that comes in, whoever we hire is going to know our system very well or teach us something different. We're trying to grow, but we also want to retain the knowledge that we learned from Joe Brady and the knowledge we learned from the Saints. So clearly the Saints, or the New Orleans Saints, have left a large impression on LSU offensive game. They want to continue that because everybody's kind of wondering if they're going to regress back to what they used to be offensively after losing Joe Brady and a bunch of other guys on that offensive scheme team. So this sounds like they're really taking their time. They're in no rush. Spring training is going to be around the corner soon, but Orgeron already says they're not trying to rush this hire. They really want to sit down and find these guys, or find the right guy for them, and interview these guys and take their time. So that is going to be interesting to keep an eye on and see what exactly is going to happen. But LSU is going to have, all the eyes on them for a little while, at least until see what they're capable of after coming off a national title. Because it feels a little bit different than if you were to win the Super Bowl, right? You win the Super Bowl is always praises, and not to say there's no praise for LSU, but it's always praise, it's always celebrations, and guys can go on tours, they do interviews, they really make their marketability skyrocket when they go to the Super Bowl. When it comes to the collegiate sports, that's not really the case because NCAA does not really allow that, because you don't make any money from doing that sort of stuff. So in reality, what's happening for them is a lot more questions, because when you do good in collegiate sports, you move up. When you do well in the NFL, unless you are at a position where you want to move up, like, coordinators or line coaches, or, the coaching tree, you want to move up, or the coaching ladder, you want to move up until you get to head coach. And once you find a position at a head coach, it's really hard to say that you're going to leave unless something arises different than the normal. If you win a championship, typically you stay more times than not, or you retire. That's it. There's nowhere but up here. You're at the top echelon of the league. You were the best in the league at that moment in time. Where else are you going to go? Probably just get a bigger contract. You get more money. You get a raise. In college, it's just another tool to improve your resume to go somewhere else and maybe to get to the NFL. So now it's more about, I think for colleges, as we are about to wrap up this segment, it's about sustaining greatness. So that's why people are saying that, Clemson is the new Alabama right now, or Alabama and Clemson are two of the best in the last decade or decade and a half or so, because it's really, really hard to sustain a level of greatness to this extent. Now, so let's look at the Patriots. What the Patriots have done in the past decade or so, or the past, 20 years, is really, really difficult, and not just difficult, but really almost impossible. It's the run that they've had of sustained success doesn't exist in football anywhere else. They've made it feel like guys are supposed to go win the title as much as they do. That's just not normal. Having won Super Bowl is supposed to be really, really hard to do. And Tom Brady has collected so many. But I think it's the same thing. It's getting to that point in college football where if you're not making multiple runs at the title and you're not becoming a dynasty, then it's not good anymore. Before it was like you get one, you're remembered forever, you're immortalized. Someone like USC that tried to three-peat, they're immortalized because of that. Alabama's going to be immortalized because of how they've handled themselves over the past 10 years. Clemson is on their way right now. Ohio State, even though they haven't won much since their resurgence, under Urban Meyer and now under Day. It's the same thing. But we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about National Signing Day.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So National Signing Day just came and went, and SI did a winners and losers for their signing day All-American Recruiting Championship. And of course, Georgia, the Bulldogs, are on top of the list as they won National Signing Day, once again having the largest recruiting class, or the best one out of the country. And it has happened again. Kirby Smart looking as smart as always on the recruiting end of the spectrum. It begins with the signing day champs, that's the list, who had a near perfect day. Not only did it add prospects like in-state lineman Cameron Keene and defensive back Darren Branch as a flip from Ole Miss, but it held on to massive talents up front despite contention. Both Broderick Jones and Cedric Van Pran were heavily targeted by other programs following the departure of Sam Pittman, but stayed true to Kirby Smart's program. So you can look at this from two ways. Georgia's really good at recruiting, and they are able to bring top guy prospects from all over around the country. And in-state, there's probably second to none in bringing guys from in-state into their program. And you can look at it from another way. When are you going to get it done, Kirby Smart? Because you bring in all this talent, you have these guys who are clearly 5-star, 4-star guys into your program. Sometimes it's the offense, sometimes it's the defense, but you just haven't been able to put it all together since going to the national title against Alabama. And of course, we know what happened at that national title. But you're going to have to get back there at some point. And the more you keep winning recruiting classes, the more you, get declared as a top 5, a top 4 pre-ranked team, the more pressure is going to get put on you in order to really, really have some success. And by not success is like a 10-win season. Georgia doesn't want a 10-win season. They want more than that. They aspire more from that. They want to win a national title, not go deep in the playoffs, not to go past the first round, or not to get into the playoffs in the first round. And, they want to be able to win the championship. They want to get there. They want to hoist the trophy. And it's been too long, and Georgia fans are tired of waiting, honestly. And you can't be really mad at them because they haven't really produced anything since going to the national championship. They've had some okay seasons. They've had some seasons that they've shot themselves in the foot, and they haven't looked as strong ever since. So when you look at it from that perspective, Kirby Smart has to get the job done, and it's coming close to a time where patience is running thin for a lot of supporters, backers, and fans. And I'm not saying he's on the hot seat right now, but if this season does not include a playoff berth, the hot seat will be on him. I feel like I can guarantee that, because with all Georgia sports, there comes a time where people really start to look at the head coach and saying, okay, you're not getting the job done. Georgia's a place where if you're not getting the job done, they want you gone. And that's the end of the day. They do it with Dan Quinn quite often on the Falcons. Every other season it's a decent season for the Falcons. And when the season is not decent, hot seat Dan Quinn talks happen. It happened last season, and he rattled off a few wins in a row and got to keep his job for another year so far. But let him skid one more time. We don't know what's going to happen. But I know people are going to try and say that he needs to figure it out or he needs to be gone. But let's look at some more winners. Tennessee. So how about a day for Jeremy Pruitt and his staff? Assembling big athletic pass catchers is always important in today's offense-first nature of football. And the Vols picked up two so talented that they're legit expected to play basketball in college. Malachi Weidman is a bona fide hooper, but he may have a higher ceiling as a jump ball and 50-50 specialist on the field. Flipping him from Florida State, especially as Ole Miss had a lot of buzz in getting his final official visit, was huge. D. Beckwith, who was linked to Florida more than Tennessee until the final stretch, was another head-turning addition. University of Tennessee finished just outside the top 10 in the SI rankings. So, Tennessee has been one of the laughing stocks of the SEC for quite some time. And I'm, as a fan of football, and hopefully, Tennessee has a really good fan base. They care a lot about their team. And I want to see them do well. So hopefully this works out for them. Another team with bigger aspirations is Miami. The most surprising news of signing day from an individual recruiter's perspective, aside from Jordan Birch, an extended sign/not sign loop, was Avante Williams, the in-state defensive back. Had plenty of back and forth in the last month or so in the process, leaning towards Georgia before focusing on the Hurricanes and Florida Gators. And get this, Williams to UF was among the most confident of predictions entering the day. The SI All-American going green thrust Miami into a national conversation instantly. So Miami is stealing things from, you would think the bigger school, right? The SEC school. Florida is actually a loser on this list, which is quite alarming because Florida has really had a fall from grace since the early 2010s, and it's not been good ever since, really. It's been since the Tebow days, Florida has kind of had some really, really up and down years. One of the last winners that I'm interested in seeing is Cincinnati. Recruiters aren't worried that Luke Fickell to Michigan State chatter just yet. The Bearcats signed the top group of 5 class in the country, and it hit the end of the cycle hard along the way. On signing day's eve, it flipped Illinois' wide receiver commitment, Jadon Thompson, and added one-time USF commit Marquez Bell at the position Wednesday. While he hasn't signed yet, former Ole Miss pledge De'Ari McDonald jumped on the board as well. So Cincinnati trying to make some news, some noise, trying to better themselves. So we have some losers here. Let's go Alabama, a loser. They had the number 3 class on the SI All-American list, but it failed to really bring any big noise or boom in the cycle. In addition to missing out on McKinley Jackson, easily the most important recruit on the board in the new year, Alabama missed on late rising defensive back Ennis Rackstraw and joined Florida in whiffing on a flip attempt of UGA offensive line signee Cedric Van Pran. Longtime in-state commit Jason Jones flipped to Oregon. though the move wasn't a surprise. So Alabama, they have a really, really good recruiting class. Of course, they're in the top 3, but they didn't really do anything to push them over the edge. So that'll be something to really ponder on, but not too much because, Alabama has the pedigree. So I don't think they worry about losing or being third on a list, because at the end of the day, it's about development and developing these players. I'll be more concerned about Florida, who needs all the talent they can get. And they added a Texas pass rusher, Princely, this is the name right here. Uman Maleen, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. Interesting. Was a big one and somewhat surprising, but the Gators again missed out on several prospects with Florida hats on the table, including 2 running backs in Jahmyr Gibbs, who went to Georgia Tech, and Ashad Clayton, who went to Colorado in the South, who signed with inferior programs. What a word, or what a term. D. Beckwith was a Gator lock before Tennessee closed on him, and we already went over how surprising Avante Williams picking up the U hat, as in the Miami hat, over Florida was to the industry. On top of the day's news, longtime verbal commitments to Leonard Manuel and Mark Britt remain unsigned while considering their options. Florida is having a tough time here and is not looking to get any better anytime soon. And from a program that was really, 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 really infamous in the early 2010s, they have really struggled as of late, and it doesn't look like the struggle has ended anytime soon or is planning to end. But you can only hope if you're a Florida Gator fan, and you're just going to keep doing the hand chops until the day comes. But we're going to take our final break here, and we're going to get into some XFL talk because it does somewhat affect college football a little bit. So that's coming up.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
So it's the inaugural season of the XFL. Once again, it has come back, and I wanted to finish off the podcast talking about the XFL because I've been watching it and I enjoy it quite a bit. I enjoy seeing these previous college studs get another chance at playing football again, man. And they're trying, and it looks like they're trying hard. They're putting a lot of money behind it. I'm for all of this. I'm in it. I'll watch the whole season, really. I don't have a team I support. There is no Atlanta affiliate, or more importantly, no New Orleans affiliate or Louisiana affiliate, but I want to see people succeed that impacted my life. And a lot of these college players impacted my life at some point. I root for Cardell Jones. I root for guys like Sammy Coates. I root for guys like Eli Rogers. It's really interesting to see these guys, and I think it will affect college football in this aspect. Guys who are not draft ready or not NFL ready have a place to go. And, I think a lot of people are going to say, well, it's probably better to try and make an NFL practice squad than it is to go to the XFL. But yeah, for now, because the XFL, maybe if they survive and they expand, right, their market size is a little bit bigger, man. They'll be bigger, then you'll get more exposure, and maybe you'll get a better chance of being pulled from a higher level than the practice squad to make an NFL run again. And maybe you're a college guy who, has a little bit of a buzz, but it's not really going to make a big difference in NFL. Probably won't see the field much. And this is your chance to show what you're really made of, man. Like, imagine if someone like Jordan Love, who will probably get drafted, But say if Jordan Love went to the XFL, you know how many people would kind of tune in for that? Like, I would watch just to see what he's capable of, because once like some actual like pretty decent talent gets through the XFL, man, this league has a lot of things going on for it. You know, the kickoffs are interesting. The way the scoring works and after touchdown scoring with the 1 to the 2 to the 3 points you can get. I love it. I love how I like being able to hear, the refs, how they think about play calling, or not play calling, but, penalties. I kind of dig the whole play calling stuff from the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators and head coaches. I'm not sure how I feel about the sideline interviews, like almost every big play or every scoring drive. That's kind of weird a little bit, especially since guys are usually out of breath. And you know how athlete speech works, where one of my favorite pastimes is thinking about how athletes talk, and especially like guys who are not like superstar athletes. They're not like college guys or guys in high school saying, just stay on the grind 100%, or, all the glory to keep grinding, that kind of stuff. Athlete talk is hilarious to me. Regardless, you get a lot of that during these sideline interviews, and I'm not too sure if that's going to stay, especially after, a guy, let down an F-bomb on live national TV yesterday. In reality, that's not his fault. I guess, he's just playing the game and being passionate, but whoever's running the little bleep machine over there at Fox missed a big time one, but it's already running around in meme circles. There's a lot of memes going on around the XFL. You saw one of the head coaches, darn it. He was just, I like hearing the reactions of coaches and seeing how they feel after they see a big play or like a big mistake happen. It's interesting, man. It feels like a quality mixture of what WWE brings with how they do backstage interviews and behind the scenes antics, but with real football. This feels like real football, and it's way more interesting than the AAF was at the start of last year. And a lot of people say, oh well, people were saying that about the AAF before, and then it just kind of teetered out. But I really think that Vince McMahon is putting a lot of effort into this, and it looks a lot cleaner. I think there was more standout guys before in AAF, but to be honest, I think that this is good. There's more interesting changes, and let me tell you, if they pick up traction, and at the start of games where the kickoff looks that dope, looks really incredible. Like the guys lining up, it's kind of like a punt, but not, and the rules surrounded by it to make sure that it works. I'm with it, man. That could be like that's some really, really chilling, exciting stuff on those kickoffs. And I just like the idea. It was a little, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't NFL branded football, but it was different, but it didn't feel gimmicky to me. It felt like it had purpose. It felt like it had some staying power. And I think that's the important thing. So why do I bring that up in the college football podcast? Because, college guys were in there, and guys that were really, really strong college figures for a long time, like Cardale Jones, man. Like Cardale Jones, for a while, people were wondering how he was going to project an NFL draft. He brought Ohio State to some interesting plateaus, and he was a big prominent figure in college football. And a lot of these guys are like smaller school studs, and they're trying to make a name for themselves to get into the NFL. And I think it's a good way. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be like a direct competitor with the NCAA. No, I don't think high school guys are going to try and go into the XFL straight off the bat. It'd have to be really interesting to see if that would ever happen. Only because I don't know the rules behind that, to be honest. Well, considering you have to be 3 years removed to even enter the NFL draft, you would have to play the XFL in 3 years, and we don't know if it'll last 3 years. So I think if they get a major deal, we might start to see some traction that way. And, NCAA is already trying to trying to find ways to compensate players for the use of their likeness or let them use their likeness for revenue and all that stuff. So, a lot of things are changing here for players. The player empowerment era in sports is all around, and we're starting to see it in different aspects now, not just, basketball, NCAA, and football, but all over the place. People are understanding that your face is a brand and brands are powerful, and you can make a lot of choices by using these brands and ideas to your own benefit. So I know a lot of guys are really, really looking at the XFL as an opportunity, man. A lot of people watched it. There's nothing else going on, man. If you're into football and that's like your thing, you're not watching college basketball. You're barely watching the NBA. The MLB is not back yet. It's just, there's a little bit of a void for football fans, man. And this is something to bring people, I guess, supplemental football. It feeds them. It allows them to keep going and be able to really, really get into it. And it's not a very long season. It's a few months, ends in April, right before the draft. I think it's perfect as it is right now as far as the timing. And, it'll build traction, man. I really think it'll find its niche, find who they need to bring in. And if they get somebody who is really, really a star, and I think they have NFL void contracts in their clauses to where if, NFL teams want to pick them up, they can walk away from the XFL, which is really good. That's smart because you don't want to keep guys in a contract, but I don't really think they want to compete with the NFL, because if they were, they might have overlapped some of the season and, take away some stuff. But I think they're trying to work with the NFL and build themselves up and maybe even make this better than the idea of this is just a feeder league or a developmental league. This is something that you can really look at as its own commodity for a time being, and also a way to watch guys that you enjoyed watching previously and guys that, really meant something to you at a later time or at an earlier time. And now, it's like, oh, look who's there. I remember watching him. I'm going to tune in and see what he does. And they do plays and they show why they had such talented people out there. And, it's just an interesting watch, man. It's not sloppy football. It's football. You would think that, it might have been a little bit less. It's not overly produced like the XFL or the NFL as far as commercials and all that stuff, but they have some interesting things going on, man. And I really, really am digging it. But, as we wrap up, how about you guys, let me know on Twitter at the GSMC College Football Twitter. Let us know how you feel about the XFL and what it can do. So we're going to wrap up here, and I'm glad you all decided to listen today. But it has been the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to please encourage you to rate and review us on whatever platform you choose to listen to us. And do not forget to follow us on our socials, that are our Facebook, Instagram, and our Twitter. And thank you for listening. See you guys next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.